All right, I'm gonna preach on something tonight that's really been a theme for me these last few years. What do I mean by theme? I mean more like this has been a reoccurring question that the Lord has been asking me the last few years. And if there's one thing I've learned, when the Lord asks you the same question more than one time, it's probably because probably because we haven't gotten there, we haven't landed there. This is just where I'm at. I've been in this place of really processing this question, and I've been processing it on and off for the last few years, and it's very simply this. Is Jesus enough? Is the Lord actually enough? And the Lord's asked me that now a few times. And here's a little just a little help. If the Lord asks you something rhetorically, the answer is usually not what you think. Like if the Lord has to ask you more than one time, am I enough for you? The truth of it is, it's probably because the Lord actually isn't enough. And I'll just be really, really transparent. One of probably the biggest things I think that the Lord has been doing in myself and in Dana, and I say the last 4 years because really we began this intense journey 4 years ago. I was a part of a global ministry with a well-known worship leader, and we went our separate ways, and that began a very difficult process, very difficult journey. And I think I might have shared this maybe 2-3 years ago when I first started coming back to the ramp. I'll never forget this. It was 2020, it was during COVID, I was living in Philadelphia. And what the beautiful thing about COVID was, I know it's maybe a morose thing to say, is we actually finally had time for God again. You know what I'm saying? Like we actually had time to just seek the Lord because I didn't know where to go preach. Before COVID, I'd fly like anywhere from 150 to 200,000 miles a year. And we'd go to like 15 countries a year. You don't realize that you could get really, really busy and sometimes too busy for the Lord. And it's amazing. And I say this, and I want to say this, a lot of you are here at the school and you're training to be in ministry. And one of the worst things that you can do is to become addicted to adrenaline through ministry. Right? And I realized I started making a lot of decisions, not because it was the will of God, it's because I was an adrenaline junkie. And the adrenaline of packing and getting on an airplane and doing all this stuff. And there was something about when the adrenaline was gone, and it's just, Dana was pregnant for the first time. And so, and it was the first few months were really hard. So it's just you and God. And we lived in Philadelphia where COVID was real. Not like in Hamilton, it was like real for like 3 days. Like it was real. Like I was afraid to drive to my mother-in-law's house to get stuff. That first month there was intense. And I had to come to the realization of how bored I was with God. I'm just being really transparent with you guys. I was really, really bored because I didn't have anything to seek him for other than God himself. And I realized that my adrenaline, my dopamine, my calling, like all this stuff was at such a spiked out level, I didn't even know what to do with the Lord now. Like it was me and the Lord. I had like the thing we always talk about, like, Lord, if it's just me and you, and finally it was just me and the Lord. Like the U.S. government granted me like a whole year of time with Jesus. And I had no idea what to do. So I realized, man, this is kind of probably too honest, but I want to be honest. I realized, man, I don't know how much I really like being with the Lord sometimes. Like it was weird not seeking him. I love like the things surrounding God, but I started realizing I don't know how much I actually like God. Now, when I was a young believer, I really liked God. I didn't just love God, like I liked God. I genuinely enjoyed God. Like I loved being with the Lord. And then something weird happens as you start growing in the Lord and you get into ministry, you get into things. It's like all of a sudden, like that simplicity of just you in Jesus, you like almost graduate from that. And I don't know when it happens, but at some point that actually happened where just actually, I remember being a high schooler or like just in the beginning of college, like I didn't know about anything. It was just Jesus, the Bible, and my friends. And we were like so content. Satisfied that we were content. Didn't care if I ever had money. Didn't care if I ever had a ministry. Like going to college, we do prayer meetings, and women, we fervently love the Lord because that is all that we knew. And for me, my context is ministry, maybe for you is business. But the moment I entered into ministry, it's like this professionalism. I graduated into something, and now Jesus was an asset to my career. He was an asset. And I remember so many times over those years, and we do, amazing things, and, went to 45 nations and blah, 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 blah. But so many times, if I were really honest with myself, I was really depressed because I missed just being that kid that just loved the Lord. But I was so addicted. That adrenaline rush, I was so addicted to going, and filling up this void that Jesus used to fill that I couldn't stop. And it's amazing, for some people, maybe it's whatever, it's pornography or money or business or whatever. For me, it was ministry. Like the way I would hear people talk about pornography, for me was the way I talked about my ministry. I just couldn't stop. And this is not an anti-ministry message. There's a right way to do ministry. I want you guys to hear me. I'm still doing ministry. But I feel like this thing right now where God, and I feel like if he's speaking it to me, I feel like he might be speaking it to a lot of us. Where we have to really ask that question to ourselves, is Jesus actually enough? Are we actually satisfied with Jesus? Or are we more moved by the things about Jesus and not the actual man himself? Go to Philippians chapter 4. We're going to go here in a minute. We're going to read one of the most quoted verses in the New Testament, but most misused verses in the New Testament. Philippians chapter 4. When I was like 16, my buddy taught me a great way to figure out where Philippians was. General Electric Power Company. Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians. And I still use it. I was like, that power company comes after the Corinthians. I wrote down a few thoughts because I do want to be organized today. I want to kind of follow a few things. So if I were to be honest, for me, for the most part, the answer to is Jesus enough has honestly been no. If I can be really, really, really honest with you guys, really raw, I said no. Theologically, by faith, I say that, but I've realized how many other things I'm chasing other than the Lord. And I'm not talking about like sinful things. Some of them are noble things. Like I said, for me, a lot of times it's been ministry. I've loved the concept of Jesus being enough. I've loved teaching about like radical devotion. But the truth is, and this is one of the dangerous things about having a platform. This is one of the most dangerous things even about having language. You can have so much language and you can spend so much time talking about something that you get to the point that you don't even have what you talk about, but you talk about it so well nobody notices. It's a really dangerous thing. And some of you young people that are coming up, you need to understand this. Language isn't impressive. A lasting lifestyle is impressive. Like I've been around people that have had more language than 1,000 people you've been. They had language, but they haven't made it. You get to the point where you just settle at being able to talk about it really good. And as long as we can talk about it really good, the need to live it isn't there anymore. I think if there could be one of the biggest indictments, even specifically on the charismatic church, on the spirit-filled church, which I'm a proud member of, is that we have traded actual life for good preaching and somebody that can handle a microphone. But I think we have to begin to take a genuine inventory of our lives, right? Okay. Again, I want to stay. I can feel that ADD thing. So what I've realized is I've mostly been needing something else. I can feel that, like that thing you wake up, whether it's ministry opportunity, a travel, shopping. Believe it or not, I am the shopper in our family, not Dana. If you knew just the last 5 backpacks that I owned, I think accumulative, we're looking at over $3,000 in back, yes. Huh? Some have been gifts. Yes. But $3,000. Why? And you always have a reason. This is probably one of the most pastoral messages that I'm going to do. And what I mean by that, I'm just going to be real with you guys. I always have a good excuse, and I always have a good reason. And I find myself, I've realized this, man, I'm always just needing something. I really need to get these jeans. I really need to get this. I really need to upgrade this. It's like this constant chasing after something else, because the truth of the matter is, I'm not dealing with the fact that I'm bored with God. I'm not dealing with the fact that I mostly have a depleted spiritual life. And what is the outcome of a depleted spiritual life? Is we become incredibly materialistic. Materialism is the byproduct of depleted spirituality. When we don't know how to truly engage with the eternal, we have to figure out how to binge on the material and put God's name on it and call it blessing. That's my friends, this is what we have done in the charismatic movement. We call it blessing, but if we were honest, what we're calling blessing is actually killing us inside. We call it blessing, it's excess. It's addiction to upgrade and this and that, and because we have to make up for the fact that we're not as satisfied with God as we say we are. Okay, Philippians chapter 4. Oh, let me read one more thing, can I? It is very easy to spiritualize materialism or adrenaline or dopamine addiction, okay? We use terms like calling, like we'll blame God for like unhealthy habits, right? When we do things that destroy us, our health, our families, this is where I've just come to. Here's my litmus test for like if I'm doing well in ministry. My family is thriving. There was a time in my life that in my mindset, well, if they're, this is just the cross. We got to lay it down. Got to lay down family. Got to lay down everybody's health. And it wasn't out of love for God. It was out of love for ministry. Because here's what I found. Every time I've pressed into the Lord, like really, like Lord, speak to me. It's always do less ministry, do more family. It's always actually been the opposite of like my dreams. It's always been the opposite. The Lord's like, no, I'd rather you be home more. I'd rather you invest into your kids more. I'd rather you And then you start realizing, why is that invitation from the Lord? Like, why is that making me, why do I feel weird? Why am I not excited? Why am I more excited about being in front of 1,000 people than being with my 3-year-old and 2-year-old? And really, this is the whole heartbeat of the message, and it's this, because I actually don't know how to be content with my life. I don't know how to look at the little that I have and look at it as, this is my portion from the Lord, and it is a good portion. I don't know how to do that. If we're honest, we don't know how to do that. Because if you've grown up in the charismatic church, where everything's about the more, the upgrade, the blessing. And what that does is it kills us, it kills our ability on how to be present and look at even the little thing that you have and see it as the blessing of the Lord. For years of my life, I constantly lived complaining, but I called it speaking out in faith. Well, this apartment isn't big enough. This table isn't good enough. This car is, everything was, I need. And we call it faith. And at some point, the Lord's just like, man, this is off. I think you come into this cycle. Why isn't God blessing me? Why am I not getting an upgrade? Why am I getting a bigger house? Maybe something's wrong. Maybe this. And then honestly, I've just come out of a little place like that, complaining to the Lord, frustrated in my heart. Why am I going to the nations again? And the Lord just like, stop. Look at what you have. If you can't thank me for what you have, Why would I give you? I mean, you guys couldn't get pregnant for 3 years. And you're ready to just move on to the next thing. Let's just do this. And we're constantly in this rat race. And we spiritualize and we put all these fancy titles on it. The thing that we are called to the most is to love God right here, right now. And I remember being in my 20s. Always just like nothing. It wasn't, like I felt like my love for God. Remember when I was in college, it didn't feel like it was real enough. Because I was still living at home, going to college, leading this little house of prayer where like 10 people came. And it just felt like when I get to go, and I get to go to all, and I get to really love God, right? We start disqualifying being faithful with your portion in life. Anybody ever been there before? What I really get to. And here's what you find out. When you get to the thing, it's not enough. Yeah. Right? You're like, I remember all those years, like, man, I can't wait till I have my own ministry, and I'm traveling, and I'm getting invited to speak, and I've got a website. That's when it's going to be real. And then you get there, and it's not, like, you are so empty. And then because you're looking at the next guy, and you're looking at this person, you're like, well, when I get to this place, when I get to do that, when I get to go to some crazy countries, or and it's always this whole rat race. And the answer is very simple. You need to learn to be content with Jesus wherever you are. Okay, Philippians chapter 4. Okay, one of the most famous passages that we often misuse. Here's Paul, starting in verse 11. Not that I speak from want. This is a powerful verse. For I have learned to be content in whatever circumstance I am in. This is Paul. Now, you might have had a bad season. You've not had shipwrecked, put in prison, bit by viper, bad season. You've not like been scourged, beaten, in prison multiple times. We really need to get the context. By the way, Philippians chapter 4, Paul is in a prison writing this epistle. He's not at a healing service. He's not at an event. He's not at a conference. He is in a prison. Now, he's not in the Philippian jail, but I have visited the Philippian jail. It is what we have today is a hotel compared to what Paul, they would have carved a space out of a rock and put them in there. There's nothing luxurious about it. This is a man in prison. There's human feces on the ground, living in deplorable conditions, and he's saying, I have learned to be content in every circumstance. If I could point out one thing that we need to grow on as Western Christians, is learning to be content in every circumstance. I'm challenged by things. When Paul says, do everything without complaining. He's not just talking about serving in the parking lot. He's talking about when things are not going well in your life. When you're having to make radical decisions because you're in a tough financial place, that's what he means. Do everything without complaining. Now, it's easy to say that when I need you to volunteer. Well, brother, do everything without complaining. No, he's talking about in life. Not just in services, in your life, that you get to a place of contentment, that you are literally so satisfied with Jesus, that Jesus is so your exceedingly great reward, whether you have a lot of money or little money, whether you live in a nice house or an ugly house, whether you have a nice car or an ugly car, you are content. Do you know what it means to be content? It means if this is the only car, let's say you got some of you got some struggle puff cars. You guys know what struggle puffs are? It's when you put ice in milk and you call it cereal. You're that broke, No, but here's what it means. Here's what it means. Even in your broke down car, you're content. That doesn't mean if you have the ability to get another car, you don't get it. That's not what I'm saying. I want you guys to hear me. But what I am saying is learning contentment with what you have now. Because here's the thing. What if the Lord doesn't change it? What if the that's your portion in life? I know some of you're freaking out because your Pentecostal theology is going wild. Just email Jillian if you don't like what I'm saying. No, but for real, like what if you don't ever get a better car? What if you never get a bigger house? What if some of the things that you're believing for, what if you don't get? Would you be content with God? I'll never forget this. We were trying to get pregnant. We couldn't get pregnant. And we were on our way to Ohio to minister. We thought we were pregnant. We were super excited. Then we found out we were not. And I was really mad at the Lord. And I was really mad because my brother, who wasn't even a believer, got his girlfriend pregnant accidentally. And I was, I was just, Lord, I'm a missionary. I've given my life. I live by faith. And my brother, I'm like, he's a heathen and da-da-da-da. You're going to give them a baby. You won't give us one. Like I'm just like telling that to the Lord. And then the Lord responded. And he said, I don't owe you anything. I don't owe you anything. If you're showing up, doing what you're doing, if you're being faithful so I can give you something, just quit and go home. But I'll never forget that moment where the Lord was like, I need to know. This is 2019, summer of 2019. He goes, I need to know that if I never open up Dana's womb and I never give you a baby, serving me will still be worth it. Tell me that right now because I don't owe you a baby. That was a tough pill to swallow. Just in that moment, now it's easy for me to look back and be like, yeah, but it was hard to really go deep inside of myself and to be able to, because that was a tough thing for us. But could we actually be content that if we never had our own children, could we live our lives content with God because God was enough? And I realized in that moment, having a child became an idol for us. It became an idol for me because having a child was proof of favor and blessing and prosperity. And I needed that affirmation. I needed that feeling that God was with us. And at least for me in my journey, until I got to the point where I didn't need it, the Lord gave it to us. So again, verse 11. Not that I speak from want, because they were just able to give to him and he was happy. For I've learned to be content in whatever circumstances I'm in. Verse 12, I know how to get along with humble means. I know how to live in prosperity. By the way, I'm not anti-prosperity. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of being filled. What a powerful, we're going to finish the verse in a minute, but what a powerful statement. In every single circumstance, no matter what is happening, no matter what my earthly portion is, no matter what I have or don't have, I have learned to be filled. Well, that goes back to the original question. What are we filling ourselves with? If it isn't the Lord, then we can't walk out verse 12. We'll always need something to fill us. This is why a lot of us are so addicted to our phones or to media or to shopping or to whatever. We're addicted because we're desperately trying to fill the thing that God wants to fill himself. Let's keep reading. He goes, I've learned the secret of being filled and going hungry. That's an amazing statement. I've learned how to live a satisfied life, getting everything I need, and I've learned how to live in seasons where I'm going hungry because I'm not getting enough. My friends, this is the Apostle Paul, who is going to write a majority of the New Testament. I want to say this because I want to challenge some mindsets. I know this might ruffle feathers, but if Paul has to endure seasons of hardship, you think we don't have to? Right? And Paul's answer was it not just like, I'm just going to rebuke it. I'm going to do this. No, you know what his answer was? I'm going to do the same. It was the same thing whether he was living in abundance or he was living in poverty. It's the same answer. I'm going to hunker down with Jesus. It's the same prescription. You've got a lot, hunker down with the Lord. you've got nothing, hunker down with the Lord. Because I'll tell you what, because when you have a lot, and then the time comes where the lot becomes nothing, if you don't have the Lord, it will destroy you. This is the secret of Paul. It's what he just finished talking about in Philippians chapter 3, right? Oh, that I may know him and the power of his resurrection, the fellowship of his sufferings. I count everything as rubbish compared to the excellency of knowing him. That's easy to say in an altar call. It's hard to say when you're driving an old car, you got very little money in your bank account and things don't seem to turn around. Or what if you do have a lot of money? What if you do have the ability to have a lot and the Lord calls you to live a simplistic life? What if you have the ability? I'll tell you what, for me, it's a lot harder to have and then the Lord say, don't live in excess than to not have. Because this is the thing that we deal with, isn't it? We live more under the judgment of men than the judgment of God. We'd rather look blessed before men than look faithful before God. And so we've bought into this whole everything more, upgrade. I look at the life of the apostles and it was like the complete opposite. I was just talking to Casey about this. I think of like Mother Teresa. Do you know how much money went through her hands? Billions. Billions. And you know why I think the Lord trusted her with billions? Because she gave 100% of it away. A buddy of mine, you guys know him, Jason Upton, he wrote a song about her. It's 1995. Mother Teresa gives a speech to the United Nations. Any of you guys remember that when she did that? She gives a speech. She was so short, they had to put like a bucket, and she still wasn't tall enough. Do you remember how tall she was, Dana? You read the book. She's like, maybe like 4 something or like 5 foot. Very small woman. Stands up, and she's still too short. And she rebukes the world for abortion. There's power. This is a woman who's had more money go through her hands than we can even imagine, but lived in incredible poverty. Because there's something about when Jesus fills you, things just don't own you. And if I can be honest, this is just where I've been. If I look at Christians in the West, we are owned by our things and not the Lord. We've been more defined by the car that we drive than the love that we have. We've been more defined by the things that we own than the love that we have. So she rebukes the world. And this is what she says. She said, if you don't want your children, don't kill them. Give them to me. I'll love them for you. And then she walks off. And everybody gave her a standing ovation. Nobody knew what to do. She just rebuked the world for abortion in her broken little English. Steps off and walks away. Anyways, Jason sees this, and he goes to another room, and all of a sudden the Spirit of the Lord comes on him, and out of his mouth he says, there's a power in poverty that breaks principalities and brings the authorities down to their knees. There's a brewing frustration and ageless temptation to fight for control by a form of manipulation. But the God of the kingdoms and the God of the nation, the God of creation sent this revelation. Through the homeless and penniless, Jesus the Son, the poor will inherit the kingdom to come. Where will we turn when our world falls apart? And all of the treasures we've stored in our barns can't buy the kingdom of God. And who will we praise when we've praised all our lives? Men who build kingdoms and men who build fame, but heaven does not know their name. And what will we fear when all that remains is God on the throne, with a child in his arm and a smile in his eyes and the song of his heart cry? There's something powerful about living a life of being radically satisfied with Jesus. Let's finish reading the portion, shall we? It says, I've learned the secret of being filled and going hungry, both of having abundance and suffering need. I've learned the secret of even being content, of being satisfied even when I'm suffering need. And there's no secret. The secret is very simple. Jesus becomes enough. Let's go to Psalm 16. You guys good? Psalm 16. A couple thoughts before we read that. I want to ask you these things. Like, what would happen if everything really did shut down, but for good? Like, what would actually happen to a lot of us? What if we could not gather more than like 10 people? Like, for real, like we couldn't. Like, what would happen if things really shut down, no conferences, no service? What if you couldn't do it? What if you couldn't have your business? You couldn't go to work? Like, what if our lives drastically changed and we didn't have all of the things? We couldn't partake in all the things that we do. Would we actually be happy? I remember when I was a young believer, people would ask this question in youth group. Because back in the early 2000s, we asked weird, intense things. Anyways, I was going to tell you a ridiculous story, but I'm not for the sake of time. But I remember it's like, what if you were alone in an island? It was just you, God, and the Bible. You know, when I was 16, I was like, yeah, I could do it. Now that I'm 35, honestly, if I were to be honest, right now in this state of my life, I don't think I'd be happy right away. I mean, really, really real. I don't know. It would take me a month or two to detox this whole life to finally get to the place where I could actually remember the Lord enough to be happy to just be me and Jesus. Now, I remember a few years ago in my 20s, I would think about this. I would think about, well, what if the Lord took away my ministry? What if the Lord said, I don't want you to travel anymore. I don't want you to preach anywhere. I want you to get a job at Starbucks or wherever. I just want you to live a quote unquote normal life. And honest, I was terrified. I was terrified. Like, what if the Lord called me to avow poverty? What if he called me to a simple life? What if he called me to just be a normal guy and work a job and never do ministry? It would terrify me that he would ever ask me to do that. I realized I don't know if I would actually like my life. That's not okay, by the way. Like, what if the Lord told you to give up all the stuff that you had? What if he told you to drastically change everything or whatever? Imagine whatever it might be that you're holding on to that's become that void filler in your life. If the Lord said, I want you to give all of that up. I mean, what if we were the rich young ruler? I think if we were honest, as Western believers, we always try to say, which Bible character are we? You and I are probably the rich young ruler. We know the Bible, but we love our possessions. We know the Bible, but we love our positions. Good teacher. What must I do to inherit eternal life? Why do you call me good? There's nobody good but God. All right, we love the Jesus of the upgrade. We love the Jesus of the blessing. We love the Jesus that satisfies the longings of my flesh. But we don't like the Jesus that becomes God over us. Why do you call me good? Do you know the commandments? Honor your father and mother, don't steal, don't covet, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I've kept all these since my youth. And then he says, well, you lack one thing. By the way, when Jesus tells him this wasn't like a spiritual analogy. This was a literal command Jesus was giving this young man. He says, well, you just lack one thing. Sell everything that you have, give it to the poor, then come follow me. In other words, he was saying, you know what your problem is? You love your things more than you love me. And the things could be anything. It could be your possessions. It could be your position. It could be your bank account. It could be your ministry. It could be whatever. Name it. It could be anything. You love that more than you love me. Until you get rid of that, you can't come follow me. By the way, that is the opposite of how we preach the gospel today. We say, well, come on a journey, and you'll get there little by little. Jesus says, no. Get rid of it all, or you can't come be with me. I've put myself in that situation. And if I were to be honest, there are times in my life I would probably walk away like the rich young ruler. Or what if we're like Abraham and Isaac? You finally get the thing that God has promised you. You've spent decades wandering around in the desert for this boy, Isaac, and you've had him 13 years, And then the Lord says, here's what I want you to do with him. I want you to kill him. That thing that you contended for, everybody was praying with you for, all the intercessors, you've labored in the desert decades, believing God. I opened the womb of Sarah, I gave you a son, now give him back to me. How many of us would actually do that? Or would we spiritualize and rationalize? Well, this is the promise of God. He gave it to me. I mean, how many of us would be willing to kill the very thing God promised and we contended for decades? I started learning something. Sometimes there's things that God gives you just for you to give back to him in worship. You guys have heard me teach this before. You remember what the Lord told them in Genesis 22? Now I know there's nothing you'll hold back from me. In other words, now I know there's nothing you love more than me. Psalm 16. I've been meditating on this psalm as I've been thinking about this topic, this theme, learning. So we need to learn to look at our lives and be content with what we have. Even if you have little, learning to look at the little as God's blessing. So I've been meditating on this. We're going to read probably most of the psalm. Is that okay? But it's powerful. It's King David. And to give you perspective, there's a good chance he's writing this psalm while he's fleeing from Absalom. Okay? Why do I say that? He's not writing this necessarily in the castle. He's writing this as somebody who is fleeing. He's losing everything. So he's up on the Mount of Olives, probably in what would become Bethany. And let's read this together. Preserve me, O God, for I take refuge in you. I said to the Lord, you are my Lord. I have no good besides you. And that's a powerful verse in and of itself. Now think about that in the context of a man that's losing his kingdom. His son is usurping the throne from David. He's taking the palace. He's taking everything. For all David knows, he's probably got days left and he is utterly poor now. Imagine being the king of a country and you are now on the run like a refugee. And this is his statement. Now, David probably is wrestling within himself to get to this point of declaring, you know what, Lord? You are my Lord. I have no good besides you. Well, what is he also saying? You don't have to restore the kingdom to me. You don't have to give me the kingdom back. Like, I am satisfied. My goodness is not found in living in the palace. My goodness is found in living with you. You and me in this sort of relationship, that is my goodness. Let's keep reading. As for the saints who are in the earth, they're the majestic ones in whom I delight. Then he curses all the guys with Absalom. Go to verse 5. Now look at this. I've been living in these verses last few weeks. The Lord is the portion of my inheritance and my cup. This is a man who has a prophecy about being king. He has built the city of Jerusalem. He's built the first palace in Israel. He has riches beyond measure. In fact, when he goes to die, he gives Solomon an offering. In today's economy, it's $200 million. Very, very, very powerful, wealthy man. And the Lord's brought him to this place where he has stripped everything from David. And he does this a lot of times with David. And I believe he does it to find out, is David just a good songwriter, or does he live the lyrics that he's been writing? Like, it's easy to say, oh God, you are my God. Earnestly will I seek you. And then he takes everything away. Are we still as fervent about seeking God now that we have nothing? It's easy to say we're thirsty for God when there's abundance of water. But what about when you're in a desert? And David's saying, no. Lord, the palace isn't my portion. The city of Jerusalem isn't my portion. The throne isn't my portion. You are the portion of my inheritance and my cup. You support my lot. Look at this, verse 6. The lines have fallen to me in pleasant places. Indeed, my heritage is beautiful to me. Now it's a beautiful verse. We quote it a lot. Here's the context. He's lost everything. All he has left is the Lord. By the way, that's the same context in which he writes Psalm 27. It's the same context. It's in that same spirit that he says, one thing have I desired of the Lord. That one thing will I seek, that you may restore the kingdom to me, because you made a promise, and the prophet Samuel spoke it, and it's been confirmed twice, and I'm your rightful king. No, he doesn't say that. His one thing isn't for safety. His one thing isn't for peace. His one thing is to behold the beauty of the Lord and inquire in his temple. And here we are in Psalm 16, and he's saying, Lord, I've realized that I get it. This stuff was starting to get to my heart, but I remember you are the portion of my cup and my inheritance forever. Friends, I believe the Lord wants to bring us, for a lot of us, back to that place where it's real again, where we can say, Lord, you are really all that I need. So I've been doing this. I've been practicing that in the mornings. I've read Psalm 16 every day the last couple of weeks. And really those two verses. And looking at my life right here, right now. Looking at my bank account where it's at. Looking at my two kids, my wife, and saying, Lord. And meeting it, the lines have fallen to me in pleasant places. Like this right here. This is all that I need. And seeing myself get delivered from materialism. Seeing myself get delivered from the lie of I need more, I need this, I need that. And getting delivered from the rat race and actually meaning it. Are you guys good? Let's keep reading. Let's read verse 11. It's a powerful verse. You will make known to me the path of life. In your presence is fullness of joy. In your right hand there are pleasures forever. Now that's easy to say when you're in a room with 1,000 people and everybody's worshiping. But we have to begin to ask ourselves the question, is it real when you're by yourself in your room? Is it just as real? Because honestly, the truth is this, it has to be more real then than it is when it is in this room. Because there's something about just the human dynamic of being in a room full of a whole bunch of other people and everyone being excited. It has to be more real when you're by yourself than it is here. All right, let's keep going. I want to hit on something. Are we good? Okay. Now with that, I want to tweak this a little bit. So one of the things that happens to us, especially as charismatic believers, is we buy into the lie of materialism. I want to talk about materialism for a little bit. Now, overcoming the lie of materialism and pursuing earthly pleasures or earthly treasures, this is a central part of what it means to be a follower of Jesus. And I was thinking about this today. Often when we talk about worldliness or fleeing worldly lusts, we usually think of like pornography, sexuality, drunkenness. But if we're really honest, worldliness in its greatest form is materialism. Here's what I mean by that. Materialism is when we love the things of the world, or we need the things of the world more than we love or we need God. Let me explain it like this. This might be a little confusing, but this is just the way my brain works. My favorite New Testament book is the book of Hebrews. In Hebrews chapter 8, the writer of Hebrew makes a brilliant point because he gives us the whole point of the whole book. And he says this, now this is the main point of the things we are saying. He says, we have such a high priest seated in heavenly places, who has erected a tent in heaven, not made by human hands, but made by God. In other words, that there is this heavenly reality, this heavenly priesthood, and that you and I are called to be part of this priesthood. In other words, our reality, our identity, who we are, is not found in anything in this world. It's fully found in that heavenly priestly reality. That all of our satisfaction, all of our identity, everything who we are can be fully found within the conversation of the Trinity. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. That is the full source of life. Worldliness is when we say, that's not enough or that doesn't cut it. I need things here to do in here what that place up there should be doing in here. And then what happens is we pursue these things and we put God's name on it and we say, well, it's just the favor of the blessing of the Lord. Well, no, sometimes it is, but if we're honest, for a lot of us, it's idolatry, it's materialism, it's loving things of this world more than we actually love heavenly reality or the promises of God. And when I mean the promises of God, I'm not just talking about you getting a better job. I'm talking about more of Him. Look at every time Paul talked about the blessing of the Lord or the more of the Lord, it was usually in reference to the knowledge of God or knowing God or having that intimate place with God. Rarely, probably never, in case you could correct me, was it ever about gaining or growing in any sort of worldly stature. But we flipped it, haven't we? We've so lost that pilgrim spirit that we're supposed to have, that now everything is about getting the most out of this life. And we lose out on everything in God that He's promised us. Let me look at a couple of passages here. Can we do that? Look at these admonitions. 1 Peter chapter 2. Verse 11 and 12. Look what Peter says. Beloved, I urge you as aliens and strangers to abstain from fleshly lust, which do what? Which wage war against the soul. Now, I don't want us to limit the fleshly lust to just sexual sin, pornography, things like that. These are anything in our lives that come to wage war against intimacy with Jesus. It's anything in our lives that come to wage war that keep the Lord from being enough in our lives. It says, keep your behavior as excellent among the Gentiles, so that in the thing in which they slander you as evildoers, they may, because of your good deeds, as they observe them, glorify God in the day of visitation. Now, I thinking about this verse earlier today, and here's the thing I was thinking about. I've been in a lot of different circles, a lot of different places, and sometimes I find that the way the world talks and the way the church talks really isn't different. I'm not talking about cussing. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the way we talk about things. Do you understand that we are supposed to be a picture of a different society? Like we are supposed to be this constant, antagonizing reminder to the world that this here isn't it. That there is a greater reality. There's an actual, real, greater kingdom. That it's more than just morals. It's more than just ideas. It is a real place. And we cannot be bought and sold the way that the world can. We're not moved. I mean, I think there's so many things. I wish one day I want to do a sermon, things that Jesus said that we don't do. And we don't believe. Here's one of them. How about when Jesus said, that which is greatly esteemed before man is an abomination before God. That which is greatly esteemed before man is an abomination before God. And I think about, man, how many things have I, in the name of God, made such a big deal about because it's great before men, but I wonder, Lord, I wonder if you would call this an abomination. But I call it a blessing. See, we are supposed to be a reminder to the world that there's a whole other world coming. Let's read another passage, 1 John chapter 2. Verse 15 through 17. You guys know this, but I want you to think about this outside of just sin. Do not love the world nor the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. Another way to say that is if you are so entrapped by the things of the world, it's because you aren't satisfied by the love of the Father. You need to supplement his love with other things. By the way, I want to make this clear. I am not anti you getting, don't leave here thinking, well, I'm never going to get a new car. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you're not satisfied. You're content whether you have a new car or you don't have a new car. All right, sometimes when you're in your 20s, you take things to an extreme and then you start a cult and you blame me for it. That's how it happens, isn't it? I say one thing, you take it out of context, you give it to your friend who knows how to edit videos, you put it on YouTube, you build a whole cult, and I didn't even know about it. But if you do that, tithe to me. Okay. All right, let's keep reading. So don't love the world. If you love the world, love the Father that in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life is not from the Father, but it is from the world. The world is passing away, and also its lusts, but the one who does the will of God lives forever. I wonder, sometimes are we wasting too much time going after things or praying for things, wanting things that are passing away, and spending very little time going after the eternal? Here's a good way to look at that. Just look at your prayer life. What are you asking more of? What are we needing more of? What are we wanting more of? I mean, what if we were David? And right now, the Lord came to you and said, okay, ask me one thing, and whatever you want, I'll give you. I wonder for how many of us the answer would simply be, well, Lord, if you're going to give me anything, give me you. And we would say that if we were up here with the microphone, but how many of us in our hearts, in our lives, is that really the reality of what's going on inside of here? All right, let's keep going. We're almost done. We need to get delivered from the rat race of bigger, bigger, better, better, more, right? Materialism, this is worldliness. You and I are called to live quiet, peaceable lives. That's what we're told by Paul. We're called to live different. We're supposed to look different. We're supposed to sound different. We are supposed to be, again, this constant reminder, almost this agonizing reminder that there is another world coming. This is why I think the Maranatha message is so important, because it keeps that plumb line inside of us all the time, that no matter how good it gets, this isn't even it. There's something about living. I remember, it's probably one of the only times I'll quote Jonathan Edwards. But he had this prayer that was amazing. He said, "Oh Lord, stamp eternity on my eyeballs." You know what that means? It's like you look at everything, but you're always viewing life through the lens of eternity. And I remember really starting to get this. Samuel and I got to go to an Eagles game. And thank God, because he had a broken leg, they gave us seats at the end zone. But they still, I don't like going to games with him. Every game he goes to, the team loses. Anyways, whatever. He gets rainbows on his birthday, but couldn't get the Eagles to win. And we're down there, and it was like packed. And I just practiced it. As awesome as it was, I stood there and I said, Lord, this is great, but this is nothing. And it might seem weird to you. It might seem a little silly. But sports tends to really get a real place in my heart. I had to discipline myself in that little moment. I didn't even tell Samuel this. I just closed my eyes and I said, Lord, I could take it or leave it. As amazing as this is, don't let this thing take hold of my heart. And I just, Maranatha, oh Lord, come make it more real to me right now, right here, in the climax moment in the stadium, thousands of people screaming, this isn't even it. We have to begin to train ourselves to live like that. All right, now how do we do that? Here's a couple of practical things. Well, we have to learn to be like Abraham, who was not looking for a city anywhere in this world. Right? He was looking for the city whose builder and maker is God. There's an amazing book that I read many years ago called The Source. It's a guy's a historical fiction writer. He wrote a book on Israel. The main character was Israel, was the history of Israel. And he talks about the birth of the Jewish people, and he makes this amazing thesis. And he says, when God set out to make himself a people, he picked a nomadic people. So he picked a nomadic people. Here's why. As long as Israel were nomads, they wouldn't fall into idolatry. It was every time that they stopped and they settled into a place, they would pick up the gods of the people. There's something about being nomadic. This is the language that we read just a little bit ago, out of 1 Peter chapter 2. When you live like pilgrims, when you live with that reality that there's nothing here is going to satisfy. Nothing here is going to be it. That whether I have a little, whatever, like you get to that I'm looking for the city, you don't easily fall into the traps that everyone else so easily falls into. All right, let's look at two more quick passages. Can we do that? Hebrews chapter 6. We'll look at Ephesians 1 and then we'll wrap up. Hebrews chapter 6, verse 19. We'll read verse 19 and 20. Look at what the writer of Hebrews says. This hope we have as an anchor of the soul. And you guys know this. What is the soul? The mind, the will, and the emotions. We need to get our souls anchored somewhere. Where is it anchored? The anchor of our soul, the hope, right, both sure and steadfast, and one which what? Enters within the veil. The Lord's desire is to take our emotions, to take our minds, to take the things that we desire, and to anchor them on the other side of the veil. Then it says in verse 20, where Jesus has entered as a forerunner for us, as a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. And what is it saying? He's saying Jesus goes as a forerunner to prepare a way for us. Where does he prepare a place for us? In that heavenly tabernacle place. And the writer of Hebrews is saying we need to learn how to take our souls and don't anchor it on anything here. Learn to anchor it in that heavenly promise, that heavenly reality. And what do we call that? That's intimacy with God, that we're anchored in that place. And here's what happens. When you're anchored, you can have a lot, you can have a little. You go through seasons of abundance, seasons of scarcity, trials, easy seasons. Your emotions aren't moved either way because you're anchored in a greater reality. Real quick, Ephesians 1. We'll skip Ephesians 1. Let's just do Psalm 110. I'll invite the band up. Let's do Psalm 110. When I think of this, you guys have heard Micah teach on this a lot. This sort of lifestyle that we're talking about, Jesus being enough, I call it choosing the priestly reward. This is what this means, choosing the priestly reward. And you guys know when Israel crosses the river, they come into the land, the Lord gives a portion of land to all the tribes, except for one, the Levites. And he says a few things. He says, the sacrifices of fire shall be your inheritance. My presence shall be your inheritance. My presence shall be your reward. So the Levites are different than everybody else. The priestly people, and it's a very simple way to say it, get no earthly inheritance. The Lord is their inheritance. Okay? This is what it means to be a priestly people. There is no earthly inheritance. Our inheritance is the Lord. His presence, the sacrifices of fire, which is ministering to the Lord. Like prayer becomes our inheritance. Meditation of the word becomes our inheritance. It isn't our duty, it's our exceedingly great reward. Being with the Lord is our portion in life. It's more than spiritual discipline. It's our reward, it's our inheritance. That's what we get out of life. Now in the Old Testament, one sect out of the people of Israel, they don't have a choice. That's how they're going to live. Then we come to the New Testament. And there's something beautiful in Psalm 110. I want to read this real quick. David prophesying about a future generation. Look at what he says, verse 3. Actually, can you guys put it up in the New King James Version? I'm doing this to be tricky. Put it up in the New King James Version. Psalm 110, verse 3. And he says, okay, your people shall be volunteers in the day of your power, in the beauties of holiness. From the womb of the morning, you have the dew of your youth. What is he saying? It's an amazing prophecy. Well, what are the beauties of holiness? Now, I remember we used to sing that line in songs, and I thought it meant like outer space. They're like floating in clouds. You know what the beauty of holiness literally means in Hebrew? In the garments of the priest. That's what it literally means, in priestly garments. Now let's read that verse again. In the day of your power, your people are going to freely volunteer themselves. And how are they going to show up? In priestly garments. In other words, they're going to make a conscious choice to choose the priestly inheritance over the inheritance of the earth. Here's what they're saying. They're saying, Lord, we volunteer. We would rather have the sacrifices of fire. We'd rather have your nearness. We'd rather have your presence than anything else. If you're going to give me abundance in anything, if you're going to give me a lot of anything, make it you. And David says there's a generation that's going to come. They're going to volunteer themselves. And they're going to say, Lord, don't give me any of this stuff. You are my exceedingly great reward. Stand to your feet tonight. I don't know about you guys. I'm tired of talking about a life in God that I don't always have. I'm tired of just being on fire when I have a microphone in my hand. Anybody else tonight? I want something that's real. I want to be like King David in Psalm 16. I want to say, Lord, you, Lord, you, Jesus, like just you are the portion of my inheritance and my cup forever. If all I ever get out of this life is the knowledge of God and nothing else, you've given me everything. If you want that, you need to repent. Maybe the Lord isn't enough right now, but you want to get to that place. You want to be that Psalm 110 generation. Volunteer and say, Lord, give me the inheritance of a priestly people. I don't want more things. I don't want to be caught up in materialism. I don't want to be caught up in the rat race. I want to be caught up in heaven. I want to be caught up in that reality of fellowship with God. If that's you and you want that, I want you to come down tonight. Come down. And I want you to take a few minutes before the band fully kicks in and just repent. Say, Lord, forgive me. Forgive me for materialism. Forgive me for the rat race. Forgive me Lord, forgive me for saying you're enough when you haven't been enough. Lord, forgive me. Forgive me, Lord, for talking even a big game. Lord, forgive us for we'd rather be blessed in things than be blessed with more of you. We'd rather be blessed with things than being blessed with the knowledge of God. Lord, forgive us. Lord, would you release that Psalm 16 right now? The Lord is my portion. Lord, you are our inheritance. Come on, just begin to declare that to the Lord. I just want to declare this. that we would be a people who say, Lord, you are my Lord. I have no good besides you. You are my good. It's not found in things. It's not found in position. Lord, we say tonight, you don't owe us anything. Even if you don't give us the things we're asking for, we say that you are worthy. We love you. You are enough, Jesus. Come on, some of you, there are things you've been holding on to. Things that you're like, well, yes, Lord, but dude, no, just lay it down. If there's things you've been believing for, He hasn't done yet, just say, Lord, just give it to Him in worship, Lord. Even if you don't do that, even if you don't do that one thing, you are my one thing. You are my good. I have no good besides you. Some of you, it's really dear things. Maybe it's getting married or having a baby or whatever. Just give it to Him and say, Lord, you are my portion in this life. Right now, where I'm at, right now. Maybe some of you, you're struggling financially. Right now, the lines have fallen to me in pleasant places. Even right now. Even without the situation turning around. Even if you don't turn it around, the lines have fallen to me in pleasant places. You are the portion. Your presence, the knowledge of God. You are the portion of my cup forever. Come on, just begin to confess that to the Lord tonight. Lord, we don't want to just say this. Come on, let's confess this. Lord, don't let this just be words tonight. Make it real tonight.